this week's edition of Council Matters, and we are delighted to have as our guest in the studio one of the Fine Gael candidates for the forthcoming general election, Stephanie Regan. Stephanie, welcome to Council Matters, welcome to East Wall, and welcome to Dublin City FM.
Thank you very much, Mike. Delighted to be here.
Stephanie, we didn't get an opportunity to have you in as a guest during the council election, so I'm going to start at the very beginning of who is Stephanie Regan. Now, a couple of weeks ago when you and I were talking, you were telling me that you're actually a Clontarf girl. What's the story there?
Well, what I said to you, I think, when I met her on the road was I'm a Raheny and Clontarf girl. Well, I've kind of lived between Raheny and Clontarf all my life because I was brought up in Foxfield. Raheny would have been there until I got married, and then I bought a house on Victoria Road. And I also lived then down in Cecil Avenue when I married. And now I am back in Raheny again. So I've been between the two.
Okay. Fine Gael then. What's your history in Fine Gael then? How far back does that go?
Well, my history in Fine Gael goes back, I suppose, to my father and my mother at home. We would have been the typical Civil War type household where my mother voted Fianna Fáil and my father voted Fine Gael, and on election days, I can only say to you, the tension could be cut with a knife. I think marital relations were under strain. So I suppose from a very early age I was aware, we were very aware of politics. Politics was always spoken of very strongly in the house. And from my own point of view then, I would have been aware of it, talked about it, used to all of that, all of the history. But really it took a while for me to really see that I might have a role or a place in politics. And I think perhaps that's the way it is in life. You make your way through life, you follow your career, you mind your children, you have your family, you build your relationships. And when you have that in order, you begin to think of other matters. And for me, I suppose if I were to say 2008 was a real wake up call for me. I realised that an awful lot of people were arguing and giving out, and everybody in politics was termed a fool. And I found myself sitting back and saying, really, is it okay to criticise everybody and do nothing? And that for me was a turning point. I am a doer, I'm a positive kind of person, and I just thought, I mentioned it to a lot of people who I had real confidence in terms of their intelligence and their brights and their ideas, and they were not willing, but very, very willing to criticise. And that was for me what decided me. I just said, okay, I'm going to try, I'm going to see if I can assist and do something on the areas that I really feel are important in my own home area. That's why I stood in 2014 in the local election. I absolutely loved it. I loved the campaign. I went door to door from the beginning of the Kilbarrack Road all the way to the airport, left and right. I loved it. I think my own understanding, if you like, of having worked as a psychotherapist, worked as a social worker, I would have already had some familiarity with various issues that would have come up. Okay. So it was a great experience for me, and a great basic education in what I'm doing now. Yeah.
Just coming back to that issue, you work as a psychotherapist, and I just wonder, you're in private practice.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering, what's your thoughts about the difference between private health and public health? Where do you come down on that? Some people say that, private practice is private healthcare is essential so that people have choice, and other people say, that choice just builds in inequality. How do you feel? Where do you
Well, everything costs money. Yeah. And I suppose when it comes down to it, everything costs money. We either have to pay for it at the beginning or at the end. And I would love to see a situation where the health services were able to provide the kind of services that I can offer to people and to organisations that I deal with. That's one of my motivators in this. You will have noticed in the initial part of my own kind of leaflets there, which you have, and in my campaign, one of the first things I did was run meetings on mental health matters, because absolutely from the heart, that is where I've spent 20 years of my life. That is where I can offer real suggestions for improvements. We have a situation, I'm not avoiding your question on public-private. Clearly, public healthcare in the physical world, if you like, of our hospitals and all of that. But in the area of mental health services, I'm speaking of here, there is huge improvement to be made.
Okay.
We are focused entirely on sickness in our mental health services. We are not focused on health, and that's an area that I feel we really need to work on, to be more proactive on and to provide services that make a difference there.
Okay, let's start. G16, I'm calling it. So are you on your election literature to... have you ruled out an election this year?
How do you mean, have I ruled out an
election?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean there.
Well, some people are saying we could have an election in November.
Oh yeah, am I anticipating one?
Well, as I say, are you ruling it out because you're...
I thought you said rolling it out. My apologies.
Apologies,
I was trying to catch in there.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Am I ruling it out? No. If you started where I am starting, which is, I only came through convention.
Okay.
In the very end of May. So I don't really have time to play with.
Okay.
So I've operated on the basis, a lot of people have been saying, it could happen this side of the year, it could happen the other side of the year. Well, I'm operating like it's happening this side of Christmas.
Okay.
I have absolutely no extra knowledge, no extra understanding of that. We don't get tip-offs or otherwise. This is, that's a decision that's a million miles outside our hands. But the way that I view it is, I have a short run in. I have to make sure that I let people know who I am, what I stand for, what I care about, and the kind of person I am, and let them make their judge of me. That's the task I have in the 6 months. That's why I've rolled out meetings. That's why I've put out my literature early and really tried to get to it. I wouldn't rule it out, but no extra information there, I'm afraid.
Let's go back to 2008 and
Okay.
essentially the big, if you like, the major issue that came out in 2008, which is still affecting us 7 years later, is you could argue was the collapse of Lehman's, or that whole property bubble and the whole collapse of financial markets. I have described, particularly referring to Ireland 2008, as a failure of politics. How would you attribute blame in that sense of the word?
Well,
it's almost like
it's probably fair to blame a lot of people. I think politicians can't stand above and say they knew nothing and it wasn't their fault. There was clearly some knowledge in the political system of what was going on and the deficits, and if there wasn't knowledge, there should have been knowledge. If you work in private business, and run, say like I have done, you realise the buck stops with you. If you're engaged to do a job and you're paid to do a job, you have to do that job. The overseeing of our institutions clearly failed.
Yeah. And
did we point the finger early enough? It appears not. It appears the searchlight wasn't on; it was entirely turned off. And there's obviously many factors interplayed here, but one of the big factors was we did not have an overseeing system that worked. And I'm not sure. I know things have got very, very tight. Now you will say in banking, the whole issues of compliance, they're all much more rigorous now. Great, we're delighted, but we're going to pay the price. And unfortunately, the people who pay the price are the people who often have the least in our society. Yeah. And for that, I think we all have to really bear it in mind over the years to come. The people who have the least always suffer the most. Yeah.
Rightly, people would say the government should carry the most of the responsibility, and their advisors or their regulators. Would you what shall we say culpability would you attribute to the opposition?
Well, they were obviously.
Were they asleep at the wheel as well?
They were in situ. So when we speak of politicians being blamed, we have to put it exclusively there. Fianna Fáil made they had their hand on the wheel, over 3 terms, and. The responsibility rests with them. As I say, if you have the job and you're paid the money, it is up to you to do it. And if you don't do it, you have to stand up and be counted.
The reason why I raise that is because about 6 months before that collapse, a senior Fine Gael figure who I happened to bump into was saying to me, "Oh yeah, it's all going in 9 months." There seemed to be a suggestion in Fine Gael that this was going to go belly up, but probably not as bad as it actually ended up, and that we could come in and save the day. Do you think that was probably playing a bit loose, if that was the case, if it was known?
I suppose, in straight terms, Mike, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. All right, let's move on then. Dublin North Bay, it's a new constituency. It's an amalgam of North East and North Central. Parts of the world we are very familiar with.
Yes.
Essentially, if you have a look over the last 50 years, it oscillated. Fine Gael. It was like a yo-yo, you know. Usually, Fianna Fáil would get 2 seats. In Fine Gael we get 2, and occasionally the Labour Party would come in, or occasionally we would throw up a maverick. This time round it's a monster.
Is it?
Well, it's 150,000 of
Yes.
an electorate. I'm estimating there will be at least 15 candidates. I mean, for the last 6 months or so, I've been calling it the group of death. How do you approach a task like that?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say it's a very large constituency. One of the reasons I think in our own party in Fine Gael there was a strong sense that they wanted a candidate in both ends of the constituency, and I live in Raheny, which is at the centre of the constituency, whereas other candidates on the Fine Gael ticket live on the further at the edge of Clontarf, and so for that reason we have some geographical spread. I live in Raheny. I have stood in the local elections in the central ward, and that is obviously of some benefit there. So I've already got good knowledge of that area. And you say, how do you approach it? Well, I suppose you approach it in from the point of view that you pick the areas that you feel you can contribute on. And this is how I am approaching it. The areas that I feel I can contribute, and the areas that I feel are important to people. And I take it from there, and I've tried to interact with people by inviting them to meetings, by, as I say, displaying to them exactly what I stand for and what I care about and what I feel I can contribute to their lives. And I've done that by distributing my literature and engaging with them, and that's what you do. And I canvass 3 days a week, and I'm getting around the constituency.
Okay. Something then, and I'm going. I'll move on to the issues in a second. But Fine Gael have got 3 candidates: yourself, Richard Bruton, and Nisha O'Meary. I think it is generally accepted that Fine Gael cannot win 3 seats. Would you acknowledge that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that was taken as a given. Yeah.
Yeah. On that basis, then, I mean, are you going to be calling for Stephanie Regan number 1 and sort of, make your mind up on the other 2? Is that the...
Well, yes, I think that's exactly how it would be. I mean, I run a campaign to ask people to select me. It is, you leave it to the people. It is up to them to make their judgment of you. In terms of how the seats will run, of course, we would have huge confidence in Richard Bruton. He's been a good minister. He's worked hard, and I think balance on the ticket of both a male and a female is a very good balance for Fine Gael, and I think it's a very good balance for the electorate. As I've said before, if you're happy with 15% of seats in the Dáil, representing just 15% representing women, if people are happy with that, well then keep voting for men, keep them in. They're all in there. Keep them in. But if you want women represented, you're going to have to vote for women, and you're going to have to vote for women number 1. And so I will be asking for the number 1 vote to balance that ticket, especially.
Okay. I'm going to put something to you now. For obvious reasons, I am not going to mention who said it.
Okay.
But an elected representative for the North East area, and that could be anywhere from O'Connell Street out to Holt, said to me, it's terrible about how we're having to have token women on tickets out in these parts of the world. Clearly, I suspect they had you in mind, because there's not too many other... we could argue Sinn Féin as well. But how do you feel when you hear somebody say that?
Well,
are they a dinosaur in that sense of the word, or do you think, well, at
I
least
think
somebody feels threatened?
No, I think there's a few things going on. I mean, one of our councillors did write a very not a Fine Gael councillor wrote an article in the Northside News, very much saying that the only women who would stand would be women who didn't have children, and I know someone came back very strongly on that. I wrote an article back directly on that, and in the Northside News, and I appreciated that they published it. I feel that, men are naturally going to be protective of their seats. Of course. Yeah. They've worked hard for them. I accept that. I fully accept that. But, there's also a time for change. And when things change, and if you want change, you have to be willing to feel a pinch somewhere along the way. But we can't have all the men and all the women if we want it to be 50-50, and if we want things to improve. So some men are going to lose their seats if we let women in. And I certainly would say, first of all, I'm not a token woman. I'm a mature woman. I've run my own business all my life. I'm an educated woman. I feel I have a lot to bring to the table. I haven't failed in anything else I've done in my life. And so tokenism is just not on my Richter scale at all. So I would take that as an insult if anybody said it to me, and I would definitely challenge it. But if I were to look at why people say it and why men say it especially, I would say it is self-protective. I would say it is a way of suggesting that we are less than we are. And I think there are good women in the field in Dublin Bay North. And I certainly think I am one of those. And maybe if I was a male councillor or if I was a male TD here, maybe I would feel threatened. But if we want women represented at the table in the Dáil, we need to vote for women.
Can I ask you then? I mean, I've covered every election out in that part of the world since 2000 thereabouts. Fine Gael have not been great at putting forward women. If you have a look at the last general election, there were no women in the three constituencies that I would say border the one I go back to that I can automatically think of as other than yourself as a Fine Gael candidate was Niamh Cosgrave.
Well,
but as I say, I can't think of too many out there. I'm not saying that the other parties are much better, but I just...
Well, maybe an important thing from my point of view, first of all, I found Fine Gael incredibly positive towards women. Okay, being dead straight, they have been incredibly positive. They have not only asked people to stand, they have nurtured them, they have encouraged them, and they will assist them in the areas that maybe they feel they need to get that extra step. I think that's being proactive in terms of women. I certainly cannot say that they have been negative. But additionally, they have appointed a lot of female senators. We now have our Minister for Justice. We have funnily enough, although we're very behind in the Dáil in terms of female representation, we're very ahead in Europe. We're something like 83rd in line with Korea in terms of parliamentarians, but we are in fact right up there with the best in terms of MEPs, which is quite an interesting statistic, I think. Where 55% of our Irish MEPs are female, so that's a good figure.
That's not,
credit where it's due. Enda has appointed a good few.
I will give Enda credit. One of his, as I say, one of his hat tricks has been his appointments to the Senate. I think they have, between Gillian Venturna and Catherine Zappone.
Good women.
Absolutely,
yes.
top quality.
Not token, I think you'd agree.
Oh, I would say top quality, and
right.
No question about that.
Exactly.
No, I've always commended Enda for that. Let's move along because we want to talk sludge. Sludge.
Yes,
Phil,
let's talk dumping.
Tell me all about this, because I'm hearing mixed things, and you've been very prominent in raising this issue. So tell us, what's the background and what's the issues there?
Okay, well, the background to the issue is that Dublin Port Company had applied, as we know, for a huge redevelopment project, planning application for redevelopment down in the Alexander Basin. That's a 230 million project, enormous in development terms, and that has been going on as a planning process really for about 2 years.
Okay.
And
what are they doing down there? Do you know? Is this for their big cruise lines, or what the hell it is?
Well, what is stated is that it is to facilitate cruise liners.
Okay. Yeah.
In, as I understand it, doing some manoeuvres in the bay, in the basin to do a full turn or whatever. That's what has been said, and I'm not saying that's not what it is, but a lot of people that I have spoken to, the concerns they have are that it is not about the cruise liners, that it is in fact, they feel that it may be about bringing in larger and larger container ships. You know, at the moment, the container barges that would come in, they hold 1,000 pallets. And if we dredge and deepen this laneway, which is what this fairway, which is what they're asking for the cruise liners, so to speak, that they will then be in a position to bring in barges, ships with 4,500 pallets on them. Yeah. Now, they're the concerns.
So it's the Dublin Port Company back again, as we say, because we've already had controversy over with them about whether it is the 52 hectares or the 52 acres or whatever it was.
Which is, and there are people I have met on this campaign, and they have, as I have said to them at my meeting last Wednesday, I said, there are people in this room and it is not their first tour of duty with Dublin Port Company.
Oh, look, I go back to nearly 40 years when they started looking for different things. they do seem to be a bit acquisitive, Dublin forthcoming.
Yes. Anyway, in terms of this,
in terms of it seems like that they've dredged the bottom of the bay, and they're going to now.
okay, let me
dump the
just
stuff. Is that
let's
what
try. I'll try and be succinct.
Okay.
But in fact, so the application is through. They have the planning permission,
Okay.
and there were oral hearings on that in May, and they have the planning permission. But what they do not have is so in that planning they got permission to deepen the fairway from 7.5 metres roughly to 10 metres. Okay, now that means they have to take out 2.5 metres, you could say, of dredged silt and sludge from the bay straight out. If you think of it like a runway, straight out to sea. And they want to do that in a dredging and dumping kind of scenario. And now they have had to apply for a permission to dump at sea. In other words, where are they going to put it? That is permission they did not have. Now, what happened then was I had put in an initial submission objection in May, and so I was alert to the fact that this would come up. And I didn't think it would come up in August, but by chance we came across it in a paper that we didn't expect on Bank Holiday Friday. Okay,
good day to bury bad news, as we say.
Yeah, exactly. A good day to drop in bad news, and all submissions to be in by the end of the month. Okay, so I thought, wow, that is extraordinary. And I honestly didn't think I was the only person who would have seen it, but that is what I did. I worked hard to get, so what I did immediately was I made contact with everybody I could, and what I did was produced a letter for everybody, put that out there, and got the response. The response was so good that I set up a meeting last Wednesday, and following on that meeting, we agreed, together with a number of people who were there, to man the supermarkets and to get the signatures last Saturday. And now EPA, I spoke with them on Monday morning, they now have 700 submissions. And that is Clontarf, Sutton, Howth, Raheny, all participated in this. And we have now started to save the bay. And I am proud of that work. Okay.
Before we go, Stephanie, yes. I know that you've been making a lot of raising a lot of and highlighting a lot of issues around mental health. Tell me about this, because I think that's going to be fairly prominent in your platform. Yes.
Okay, thank you. It's really just to say that, as I said to you at the beginning, I have a lot of experience in mental health, and my hope is that I will be able to make an impression on building services that are proactive and that focus on health rather than illness, because that's what we have. I want an early intervention system where people can go and have one session where they can get proper access to services, direction on where to go, and an immediate intervention, immediate early help with any problem. We know it in the physical sense, will save money. So if you help people early, if you think of health as a continuum, you're not very sick straight away. You're a little unwell for a while, and before that you are well. So I am trying to push forward that we will have systems that are going to ensure that people get the earliest help with their problems, and that's going to make a difference.
Okay, just absolute conclusion. Often economists and politicians don't think that their decisions have an impact on people's mental health. What's your thoughts on that? Do you think, say, an economic downturn or an economic recession has an impact on people's mental health as much as it does on their economic health?
Everything matters, but let me tell you, I work in a practice. I see the spread of issues that come in. It is not only mental. It is not only financial. Absolutely, the stress that people are under in the lives we have now, they are not only financial. Of course, financial matters. So does marital breakup. So does very difficult children. So does emigration matter. So do all of these. So the range is huge. The range doesn't really need to be analysed as much as how we help them.
Next Monday night up at Clontarf Castle, Vincent Brown is going to be doing some filming. You get an opportunity to raise some more of these topics. But in the meantime, Stephanie Regan, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah,
and we wish you all the very best come G15/16.
Thank you very much.